So we thought we'd talk a little bit more about hügelkultur. We put up a video about this and got an unexpected response. It seems it's something that a lot of people are interested in, so we talk a little bit more about it. So what we've learned started with a book called Farming the Woods. One of the authors' names is Ken Mudge, M-U-D-G-E. Very good book. And there's a good section about hügelkultur in there and about the environmental benefits, as well as what you can do with it in a forest like ours, which is newer growth. It's not new growth, but it's certainly not old growth. But it talks a lot about trees being carbon sinks. They pull in a lot of carbon from the atmosphere. And if you cut trees down and you burn them, you re-release the carbon. But if you want to keep the carbon from being released back in the atmosphere, you want to put it back in the ground is one thing to do with it. So if you look down here, you see there's all these divots. Here and there across our land, there are these areas where they have these vehicles they called skidders that they would use to drag the logs out when they cut the trees down. So they left these great ditches in some places. So happens this one is where we want to be able to cross back and forth a lot to get up to the elderberries that are starting to grow. So we've got so far 35 plus elderberry plants growing, which 10 or 15 pounds of berries during harvest a piece means it would be helpful to have a vehicle down here. So if we can drive a vehicle across, it's going to help us out a lot. So that means we want to fill this stuff in. You see this one hasn't been filled in at all. Over here we started with some of this cut debris that was already present here on the land. Before we bought it, somebody had come in and cleared some of the underbrush. So the idea is you start with some of the bigger material, you put it down in a divot. If there isn't a divot, they say, oh, you can create a mound, you build it up, and that way you can have your carbon sink. People will even cover it with some compostable material and make a bed out of it to plant in eventually. But for us, all we're doing is trying to smooth out the ground and keep the wood down in the ground so the carbon stays there. So we've got some of the bigger pieces. We'll put some smaller pieces on top of that, pull some dirt over it, and that's kind of all that we're doing about it. So it's good for the environment. It helps us out. We're not hurting anything at all. And we already have these brush piles in several places that we can drag the material over with. So there's more you can do with hügelkultur, but this is what we're doing with it. And it's nice being able to make use of this idea in a forest farm so that we're not damaging anything. We're actually helping the environment overall and making it a little easier for us ultimately to harvest these elderberries, which are still very tiny, but supposedly within 2 years they're going to start producing, and they're growing very well. So it's a good time for us to prepare to be able to get to the harvest. So that's it. I highly recommend the book. It's great for farming the woods overall. It's only a few pages on hügelkultur, but always gives good pointers to other information as well. And we have no financial interest in the book. We just found it and think it's very good. So, happy hügelkulturing.